The major international news story right now is the situation taking place inside of Iran, where it appears there's some kind of uprising happening, but not everything is as it appears. Now, there were recently protests against the government. The one inside of Tehran was only 200 people, but the Western media greatly exaggerated it in order to make the crowds look even larger. The counter-protests against them in support of President Rouhani were a great deal larger, as can be seen in these photos. Well, now, of course, the Western media only focuses on the anti-government protests and doesn't bother reporting much in the way of the pro-government ones, which are much larger. Now, in keeping with this, because it does support their interests, U.S. President Donald Trump spoke at the UN, where he basically called Iran a dictatorship.
Oppressive regimes cannot endure forever, and the day will come when the people will face a choice. Will they continue down the path of poverty, bloodshed, and terror, or will the Iranian people return to the nation's proud roots as a center of civilization, culture, and wealth, where their people can be happy and prosperous once again?
Now, another anti-government rally took place, and it too was confronted with a pro-government rally that was much larger than it. Now, the question arises, why are these protests happening? Essentially, Rouhani has been privatizing things, and the gap between the rich and the poor has been growing. Hardliners favor more state control of the economy and social programs. Rouhani is friendly to the Iranian private capitalists who hate the government and love the U.S. The effects of the U.S. sanctions against the country have been taking their toll on the country as well. So hardliners are now rallying the public against him and his privatizations. Now also, oil prices have been rising, so Iran's hardliners have more money. Now, as of the recording of this video, it happened just before I began recording it, there was a terrorist attack that took place in the country. Apparently, people from the al-Nusra Front, which were affiliated with the anti-Assad forces in Syria, have blown up an oil pipeline inside of Iran. 1. Ansar al-Furqan al-Qura's Martyrs Brigade released videos showing them blowing up a pipeline in Omidia region of Al-Hawaz. So this has already escalated from simply mere protests into something much larger. Now, there are legitimate grievances that the people of Iran have against their government. No country is perfect, and there's always going to be problems, especially when you have U.S. sanctions on the country designed to hurt the economy and hurt the livelihoods of the regular people there. But these protests have been automatically backed very quickly by the MEK and the Pavlovists, who are known to be pro-imperialist. So this makes the whole thing very suspicious. And of course, we saw the Saudi government come out in support of the protesters very, very quickly, even before much information was given out. So one certainly does get the feeling that this is being backed by powers hostile to Iran in the region. Now, this all has very much the flavor of a color revolution, the same kind of the U.S.-backed so-called revolutions that happened in other countries with the specific goal of destabilizing the regions and making it friendly towards U.S. power. One of the biggest holdouts against U.S. imperialism in the Middle East has been Iran. Iran is also a large ally of Russia. Now, given that every other country in the Middle East is either under the control of the United States or is currently being assaulted by the United States, like Syria, like Afghanistan, it stands to reason that Iran would eventually become a target. Now, we see this pipeline being blown up, but we also see that the situation in Syria has basically been concluded. The terrorist forces, the ones backed by the United States trying to topple the Syrian government, have been defeated, and there have been many reports, even by the mainstream media, that these remaining forces have been fleeing the country and going to others. Many of them have been going to Afghanistan, where ISIS has a great contingent of its fighters. Now, it seems perfectly reasonable that many of these anti-Assad government forces who have been defeated would possibly flow into Iran as well. being that they are controlled by the U.S. and the U.S. is in direct hostilities with Iran. So it makes it a very obvious place for them to go. Now, immediately, much of this seemed like the U.S. was just manipulating small anti-government protests, making them bigger. But then this terrorist attack took place, blowing up an oil pipeline. So now it really seems that there's little doubt in anyone's mind that this is very much being caused by the U.S., and this is possibly the beginning of a color revolution inside the country. Now, of course, since this whole thing started, we've seen, a large contingent of the Marxist community hasn't really said anything on this issue yet, but I've seen a lot of murmurings by a lot of anarchists, left-coms and Trotskyists, the usual suspects, already against the Iranian government and supporting this anti-government position, even though at this very early stage it's very obvious that this is being supported by the United States. And it's not uncommon for these kinds of groups to support U.S. imperialism in these ways. I mean, not just the whole situation with the Kurds, but with the anti-government forces that existed inside of Syria. The al-Nusra Front, which turned out to be al-Qaeda, and ISIS, which is backed by the United States, Saudi Arabia, and Israel, also saw support coming from these same three groups. So this situation is still unfolding, but I think this is a good quantity of information that is available at this time. It seems very much that as the attempt to overthrow the Syrian government has failed, and that the government is now beginning to rebuild itself, particularly with the recent images of the second Christmas inside of the country in Damascus, that now U.S. foreign policy is switching itself to another field of interest would be Iran. Now, this also comes in the context of U.S. President Donald Trump and the U.S. ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, accusing Iran of having violated the JCPOA agreement, which other countries, not just Iran itself, but other Western countries, other imperialist countries, are admitting, no, Iran didn't actually violate the agreement at all. And the U.S. is looking for an excuse to try to write a new agreement, which would place even harsher sanctions on the country. So the timing of all this is certainly no coincidence. This is another plot by imperialism ramping itself up against another country. And in this case, it will be Iran. So we should not be surprised if we see some kind of U.S.-style color revolution appearing in Iran sometime soon.
Thank you for watching. If you like this program, then please head over to my Patreon page and set up a monthly donation. It's your donations that keep this program running. Also, if you would like, please rate, comment, subscribe, and share in various social media.